All right, listener, you handed us a pretty big stack of research on all the benefits of caring for country. So I guess we're diving deep into Indigenous land management today in Australia.
Sounds good.
We're going to be talking about health and culture and economics and the environment.
All connected.
Yeah, let's see what we can dig up for you.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how caring for country has kind of evolved, from just these informal generational practices that have been happening forever
Yeah.
into, these formal government programs that are popping up.
Yeah, I'm seeing some pretty impressive stats in here too.
Oh, yeah.
Like apparently Indigenous ranger programs alone have pumped over $100 million into remote economies.
Wow.
Talk about untapped potential.
Yeah.
But before we get too far, I think we need to back up a little bit. Can you just explain what caring for country actually means?
Sure. Yeah, it goes way beyond, just managing the land.
Oh, yeah.
It's about this really deeply spiritual connection with the land. And there's this anthropologist, Deborah Rose, who kind of describes it beautifully.
Okay.
She says that country is a living entity with a yesterday, today, and tomorrow, with a consciousness and a will toward life.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah.
It's almost like a sense of responsibility.
Yeah.
Like you're caring for a family member or something.
Exactly. And that's where we kind of see the clash with, conventional Western ideas about land management, which are often just focused on resource extraction.
Right. Yeah, just take, not give back.
Yeah.
Now, I'm seeing a lot in here about health benefits, which is really interesting to me.
Yeah.
So how does caring for country actually impact people's well-being?
Well, in Indigenous cultures, health is holistic.
Okay.
It's not just about your physical body.
Mm-hmm.
It's about your mental, cultural, and spiritual well-being as well.
Right. It's all interconnected.
Exactly. And there's research that backs this up.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There was this study in Arnhem Land that found that people who were actively engaged in caring for country had significantly lower rates of chronic diseases.
Wow.
Like obesity and diabetes and even heart disease.
That's remarkable.
Yeah.
So what were they actually doing that was having such a positive impact?
Well, the researchers looked at all sorts of activities from traditional burning and hunting practices
Right.
to just spending time on country and participating in community events.
Okay.
It seems that the deeper the connection, the greater the health benefits.
Wow. It makes you wonder if modern society has kind of lost touch with that fundamental connection to the land.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
And there's this really striking anecdote from the Murray River region
Oh.
where locals noticed that the declining health of the river was actually mirroring their own declining health.
It's like a canary in the coal mine.
Yeah.
Warning us that our well-being is tied to the health of the environment.
Precisely. And it challenges that common misconception that living in remote areas is inherently unhealthy.
Right.
It's about recognizing that caring for country can actually be incredibly empowering.
Empowering in what sense?
Well, it fosters a sense of purpose and belonging,
Mm.
especially among younger generations.
Okay.
It provides opportunities to learn traditional skills and knowledge from elders,
Right.
which strengthens their cultural identity.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And this is where the concept of a hybrid economy kind of comes into play.
Okay, so it's like a blend of traditional practices and modern economic models.
Exactly.
Can you give us an example of how that actually plays out?
Sure. Take the ranger programs, for instance.
Okay.
The government's Working on Country program has invested millions of dollars
Wow.
in providing jobs and operational funds for Indigenous communities to manage their land.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, but it goes beyond just salaries.
I see. So what other kind of economic benefits are we talking about?
Well, it's about tapping into markets that value sustainability and cultural heritage.
Okay.
So things like bush food production, the arts and crafts industry, even sustainable wildlife harvesting.
Really?
Yeah, there are ranger groups like the Jelk Rangers
Okay.
who have developed these sustainable programs for harvesting things like tarantulas and turtles.
Wow. So there's a market for that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then, of course, there's ecotourism.
Right. Yeah, that's a big one.
Huge.
Are there specific examples of successful ecotourism ventures that are tied to caring for country?
Oh, yeah, tons. The Bardi Jawi-owned Cape Levesque Resort in the Kimberley is a great example.
Okay.
It's not just about bringing in tourists. It's about showcasing Indigenous culture
Mm-hmm.
and allowing visitors to really experience the land through an Indigenous lens.
I feel like that's a trend that we're seeing more and more globally.
It definitely.
People want these authentic experiences.
Yeah.
They don't want to just go to the typical tourist traps anymore.
Exactly. And that's why it's so crucial to approach these economic opportunities carefully.
Right.
Making sure that cultural values are respected
Hmm.
and that communities aren't exploited.
Yeah.
We are seeing some challenges in emerging markets like the carbon market,
Okay.
where there's a risk of prioritizing profit over genuine environmental stewardship.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Between economic growth and cultural sensitivity.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of balance, we can't forget about the environmental benefits,
Of course.
which are at the core of caring for country.
Right, like protecting and preserving the land is the whole foundation.
Exactly.
I'm curious, though, what specific environmental services do Indigenous communities actually provide?
Well, what's fascinating is the sheer diversity of those services.
Okay.
Indigenous communities are experts in fire management, weed control, biodiversity conservation, even quarantine work.
Yeah.
And it's not just anecdotal.
Right.
We're seeing some incredibly successful large-scale projects.
Like, what are some examples that stand out to you?
Well, the Dugong and Rain Turtle Project is a great example.
Okay.
It's a collaborative effort between Indigenous communities and scientists to protect these vulnerable species.
Awesome.
Then there's the Ananga Pitjantjatjara Cyber Tracker program,
Okay.
where rangers are using cutting-edge technology to monitor wildlife populations.
It's amazing to see how Indigenous knowledge is being combined with, like, Western science
Yeah,
to create these innovative programs.
definitely. And there's been some incredible work done with fire management techniques,
Right.
where scientists are actually learning from traditional burning practices
Hmm.
to improve modern fire management strategies.
Wow.
And they're using indigenous knowledge of animal behavior to enhance wildlife surveys and conservation efforts.
That's incredible. So these programs like the ones you mentioned are part of what are called IPAs?
Exactly. Indigenous protected areas,
Okay.
or IPAs, they're playing a crucial role in achieving conservation goals.
Okay.
They're incredibly cost effective, and they cover about 20% of Australia's national reserve system.
Wow. So it's not just about protecting, like, small pockets of land.
No,
This is about managing vast landscapes.
that's right. And what's exciting is that these IPAs are becoming models for sustainable conservation worldwide.
That's fantastic. So we've seen how caring for country is about so much more than just protecting the environment.
Right.
It's about health, culture, economy, and, like, a truly holistic approach to well-being.
Yeah.
But with all these, like, interconnected benefits, are there any potential downsides or unintended consequences that we should be thinking about?
That's a great question, and it's crucial to be aware of the complexities.
Yeah.
While IPAs are incredibly valuable, there can still be challenges in aligning indigenous and ecological perspectives on resource use and land management.
Can you give us an example of one of those challenges?
Sure, one issue is navigating the tension between traditional hunting practices and conservation goals.
Right.
Some endangered species that are, culturally important for hunting might require different management approaches
Yeah.
to ensure both cultural continuity and species survival.
So it's about finding that delicate balance, respecting cultural traditions while ensuring long-term sustainability
Exactly.
for both people and the environment.
Yeah, and those are the kinds of conversations that need to happen more and more.
Absolutely. Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to pause here for now.
Okay.
But listeners, stay tuned because we'll be back in just a moment to delve even deeper into the world of caring for country.
Sounds good.
Welcome back, listener. It's just fascinating how caring for country, like, intertwines so many aspects of life.
It really does.
From personal well-being
Right.
to economics to conservation, it's all connected.
Yeah, what's really striking to me is the way that Indigenous Australians view the land like it's an extension of themselves.
Right.
I remember reading this one study where they talked about the land being sick or wild if it wasn't being properly cared for.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
It's like they see this direct link between the health of the land and the well-being of the people.
exactly. It's not just about managing resources, it's about nurturing this reciprocal relationship.
Right.
Giving back as much as you take.
And that's really where these Indigenous ranger programs come in.
Yeah.
They're at the forefront of this whole movement.
I'm so impressed by how these programs are blending traditional knowledge with modern techniques.
Oh, it's an amazing combination.
Yeah.
Like, for example, rangers are using cutting-edge technology like cyber tractors
Right.
to monitor endangered species, but they're also drawing on, like, centuries of indigenous knowledge
Right.
about animal behavior and tracking.
It's so cool. It's
Yeah.
like instead of choosing one approach over the other,
Right.
they're finding ways to like combine the best of both worlds.
You got it.
Yeah.
And that's leading to some amazing innovations.
Yeah.
Take fire management, for instance.
Okay.
Indigenous Australians have been using controlled burns for millennia
Right.
to manage the land.
Yeah, I remember reading about that they use fire to clear undergrowth and prevent wildfires
Yeah.
and encourage biodiversity.
Exactly. And now scientists are working side by side with indigenous communities.
Oh, wow. To study these traditional burning techniques
Okay.
and figure out how to incorporate them into modern fire management strategies.
It's remarkable to think that we're actually learning from indigenous knowledge
I know.
to improve our own practices.
Yeah, it's a humbling realization that Western science doesn't have all the answers.
Right.
There's so much wisdom embedded in these indigenous knowledge systems that have been developed and refined over countless generations.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I'm also seeing a lot about how these ranger programs are creating jobs and supporting economic development,
Yeah,
especially in remote communities.
absolutely they are. And it's not just about conservation.
Okay.
It's about creating sustainable livelihoods for indigenous people.
Right.
Providing them with the resources and the skills to care for their own land.
It's about empowerment, isn't it?
It is.
Giving people the tools and the opportunities to build their own futures.
Absolutely.
But what about beyond the ranger programs? What other economic opportunities are stemming from caring for country?
Oh, there's a whole world of possibilities opening up.
Like what?
Well, think about the booming market for bush foods, for example.
Okay, yeah.
Indigenous communities are in a perfect position to lead this industry.
Right.
They have the knowledge of native plants and sustainable harvesting practices that are in such high demand right now.
It's not just food either, right?
Right.
There's arts and crafts.
Yep.
There's ecotourism.
Mhm.
It's like a whole new economy springing up around cultural heritage and respect for the environment.
Exactly. And it's an economy that has the potential to benefit everyone.
Wow.
Consumers are eager to experience these unique products and services.
Right.
And indigenous communities are gaining economic independence and this renewed sense of cultural pride.
It sounds like a win-win situation.
I think so.
Are there any potential downsides to be aware of?
Well, there are always challenges to navigate.
Yeah.
One issue is ensuring that these economic opportunities benefit the entire community,
Right.
not just a select few. You know, there's a risk of exploitation if these ventures aren't carefully managed with community input and consent.
That makes sense. It's about making sure that everyone has a voice at the table
Yeah,
and that profits are shared equitably.
exactly. What other challenges are there?
Oh,
Another big one is protecting intellectual property rights.
right.
Indigenous knowledge is incredibly valuable, and it's important to have safeguards in place to prevent it from being exploited by outside interests.
That's a crucial point. It's about respecting cultural heritage
Yeah.
and ensuring that indigenous communities retain control over their own knowledge and resources.
It's about finding that delicate balance between economic development and cultural preservation.
Right.
It's not always easy, but the potential rewards are immense. We're talking about a model for sustainable development that benefits both people and the planet.
That's a vision worth striving for.
I agree.
A model that honors both cultural heritage and environmental sustainability, it sounds like, these IPAs. The indigenous protected areas are really leading the way in this movement.
They really are. IPAs are a phenomenal example of how indigenous communities are taking charge of conservation and doing it incredibly effectively.
Can you remind us what exactly an IPA is and how it works?
Sure. An IPA is an area of indigenous-owned land that is dedicated to conservation
Okay.
and managed by the indigenous community itself.
So it's like a national park, but managed by the traditional owners of the land.
That's a good way to think about it.
Okay.
There are over 70 IPAs across Australia,
Wow.
covering a huge variety of landscapes from deserts and rainforests to coastlines and marine environments.
That's impressive. What kind of work are the rangers doing in these IPAs?
It really varies depending on the specific location
Okay.
and the needs of the ecosystem.
Sure.
But some common activities include controlling invasive species, managing fire regimes, monitoring wildlife populations, and restoring degraded habitats.
That sounds like incredibly important work.
It is, and the rangers are so passionate about it.
Yep.
It's not just a job for them, you know? It's a way of life. It's about continuing that tradition of caring for country that's been passed down for generations.
Yeah, and I'm seeing here that IPAs aren't just beneficial for the environment.
Right.
They're also providing social and economic benefits for indigenous communities.
That's absolutely right. The ranger programs create jobs and provide training opportunities, especially for young people.
Okay.
And this strengthens cultural identity and pride.
Right.
Being able to practice these traditions on their own land is incredibly empowering.
It's like a reclaiming of their heritage,
It is.
a chance to reconnect with their roots in
Hmm.
like a tangible and meaningful way.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And on top of all that, IPAs are incredibly cost effective
Really?
compared to other conservation methods.
Why is that?
Well, indigenous communities have such a deep understanding of their land.
Right.
They know the ecosystems, the plants, the animals.
Hmm.
It's all ingrained in their culture. So they're able to manage these areas much more efficiently than outside organizations might be.
It makes perfect sense. They've been doing this for thousands of years.
Exactly. And it's something that the government is starting to recognize.
Okay.
There's been a significant increase in funding for IPAs in recent years.
That's encouraging to hear. It sounds like IPAs are a model for sustainable conservation
Yeah.
that other countries could learn from.
I absolutely agree. They're a shining example of how we can work together to protect our planet
Mm-hmm.
while also respecting indigenous rights and cultures.
Now, I'm really curious to learn more about some specific examples of IPAs
Okay.
and like the incredible work that's happening on the ground.
Yeah.
Do any particular case studies stand out from the research?
Oh, there are so many inspiring stories.
I bet.
One that comes to mind is the Martu Indigenous Protected Area in Western Australia.
Okay.
It's an incredible example of how traditional knowledge and modern science can work together to achieve amazing results.
Okay, tell me more. What makes the Martu IPA so special?
Well, the Martu people have been living in this vast desert region for thousands of years.
Okay.
Their knowledge of the land is unparalleled, and their IPA is one of the largest in Australia,
Okay.
covering over 13 million hectares.
That's enormous. What are some of the things they're doing to manage such a vast area?
The Martu Rangers are doing so much incredible work.
Like what?
They're managing fire regimes, protecting threatened species like the bilby and the great desert skink,
Okay.
and controlling invasive species like feral cats. They're also working to reintroduce locally extinct mammals.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm particularly fascinated by what I've read about their approach to fire management.
Oh, yeah.
Could you tell us more about that?
Sure, they've developed this amazing technique called patchwork burning,
Okay.
which combines traditional burning practices with modern technology.
Okay.
They create a mosaic of burnt and unburnt areas,
Right.
which promotes biodiversity and reduces the risk of large, uncontrollable wildfires.
It's like they're weaving together ancient wisdom and modern science. Yeah. To create this like tapestry of resilience on the land.
That's a beautiful way to describe it.
Yeah.
And the Martu Rangers aren't just doing this for themselves.
Oh.
They're sharing their knowledge with other land managers across Australia.
Wow.
They've become real leaders in the field.
It's a perfect example of how Indigenous knowledge can make a real difference in the way we manage our landscapes.
Absolutely.
Now, are there any other IPAs that you think are worth highlighting?
Absolutely. Another one that stands out is the Wardecken Indigenous Protected Area in Arnhem Land.
Okay.
It's a place of breathtaking beauty
I bet.
with rugged sandstone escarpments, lush rainforests, and pristine waterways.
Just from the pictures I've seen, it looks absolutely stunning.
It is.
And I understand it's home to a lot of threatened species as well.
It is. It's a biodiversity hotspot.
Wow.
You've got the iconic northern quoll, the endangered Gouldian finch, and countless other unique plants and animals.
Wow.
The Wardecken Rangers are doing an amazing job of protecting this fragile ecosystem.
Oh.
They're managing fire-controlling weeds, monitoring water quality.
Yeah.
It's a full-time effort.
And are they able to balance those conservation efforts with maintaining their cultural connection to the land?
Absolutely. Caring for country is at the heart of their culture.
Mm-hmm.
They see their work as a way of honoring their ancestors and ensuring that the land remains healthy for future generations.
Right.
They even incorporate traditional ceremonies and rituals into their management practices.
It's so powerful to think about that unbroken chain of connection,
It is.
stretching back thousands of years.
It really is. The Ward Beacon IPA is a testament to the strength and resilience of Indigenous culture.
And we've talked about the Martu IPA in the desert
Right.
and the Wardecken IPA in the rainforest.
Yeah.
Are there any other examples that kind of showcase the diversity of these programs?
There are so many, but one that's particularly close to my heart is the Okola Indigenous Protected Area in Cape York Peninsula.
Okay.
The Okola people have a long and inspiring history of fighting for their land rights.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're leading the way in conservation.
Yeah, I've read a bit about their struggle to reclaim their land. It was a long and hard-fought battle, wasn't it?
They faced a lot of opposition
Yeah.
from mining and development
Right.
interests, but they never gave up. And in the end, they were victorious.
Good for them.
Yeah.
So what does the Ocola IPA look like today?
It's a vibrant and diverse landscape
Okay.
with rainforests, wetlands, coastal dunes. It's just incredible.
Wow.
And the Ocola Rangers are doing amazing work protecting threatened species, like the palm cockatoo and the estuarine crocodile.
Okay.
They're also restoring degraded habitats and working to control invasive weeds.
And are they incorporating their cultural heritage into their management practices as well?
Absolutely. For the Ocola people, culture and land are inseparable. They're
Right.
working hard to preserve their language, stories, and traditional knowledge. They even have a program to teach younger generations about traditional hunting and gathering techniques.
It's amazing how they're weaving together all these different aspects of their culture into their conservation work.
It's a holistic approach that recognizes the interconnectedness of all things.
Yeah.
And it's a model that more and more people are starting to embrace.
It's inspiring to see how caring for country is gaining recognition and momentum,
Yeah.
not just in Australia, but around the world.
Mhm.
It feels like a movement that's really starting to take hold.
I agree. I think people are realizing that Indigenous knowledge has a lot to teach us about how to live in harmony with nature.
Right.
We have so much to learn from these ancient traditions.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
From the individual health benefits to the economic opportunities and the large-scale conservation efforts.
Right.
Caring for country seems to touch every aspect of life.
It really does.
But before we wrap things up, I'm curious to explore some of the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead for this movement.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's still a lot of work to be done, but I'm optimistic about the future.
Yeah, it feels like we're at this turning point, you know?
Yeah.
More and more people are recognizing the importance of Indigenous knowledge and leadership when it comes to conservation.
Right.
But like, what are some of the biggest hurdles that you see facing caring for country, you know, in the years to come?
Well, funding is a huge one.
Okay.
While we have seen like a really positive shift with increased government support for these Indigenous-led programs, it's still not at the level it needs to be
Right.
to meet the demand
Yeah.
and to like fully realize the potential of these initiatives.
Right. These programs require significant resources to operate effectively,
They do.
especially across such vast landscapes.
Yep.
What other challenges stand out to you?
Well, there's the ongoing issue of competing interests.
Okay.
Things like mining and development projects
Right.
often put pressure on culturally and ecologically sensitive areas.
Right. It's a constant tension
It is.
between economic growth and environmental protection.
Yeah, how do we balance those two?
Right. It's that age-old dilemma, isn't it?
It is.
Trying to balance the need for economic development with the imperative to protect our natural heritage. How can we find that balance?
That's the question.
Especially when there's such powerful interests involved.
Well, I think the key is to bring Indigenous voices to the forefront of decision-making processes.
Okay.
Ensuring that their perspectives and their values are integrated into land management plans and policies.
Right.
We need to move beyond just consulting communities.
Yeah.
We need to actively involve them in shaping the future of their lands.
Right. So shifting from like a top-down approach
Yeah.
to a more collaborative and inclusive model.
Exactly.
But even with increased funding and Indigenous participation, there's another looming challenge that we have to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
Climate change.
Huge.
It's already impacting ecosystems and communities worldwide,
Mm-hmm.
and those impacts are only going to intensify in the coming years.
Absolutely. Climate change is a major threat to Indigenous communities and their ability to care for country.
In what way?
Well, rising sea levels, more frequent and intense droughts and floods,
Right.
and shifts in plant and animal life are all having a profound impact on Indigenous lands and cultural practices.
It's heartbreaking to think about the potential loss of knowledge and traditions that have been passed down for generations.
I know, it's tough.
Are there any specific examples in the research that highlight these climate change impacts?
Yeah, there are a few that come to mind.
Okay.
Coastal communities are seeing sacred sites eroded by rising seas,
Oh, wow.
and traditional hunting and fishing grounds are just disappearing.
Right.
Inland, some communities are struggling with prolonged droughts that are impacting water sources and traditional food sources.
It's like the changing climate is disrupting this delicate balance
Yeah.
that has sustained these communities for millennia.
It's a big challenge.
It's a stark reminder that climate change isn't just an environmental issue.
Right.
It's a cultural issue, a human rights issue. It is. But in the face of all these challenges, are there any signs of hope? Any strategies for adaptation and resilience?
Oh, absolutely. Indigenous communities are incredibly resilient.
Yeah.
They've been adapting to change for thousands of years.
Right.
And they're drawing on that deep well of knowledge and experience to navigate the challenges of climate change.
Can you give us some examples of those adaptation strategies?
Sure, some communities are reviving traditional food cultivation techniques
Okay.
that are more resilient to drought or flooding.
Wow.
Others are working to restore coastal ecosystems that act as natural buffers against storms and rising sea levels.
That's great.
And they're also sharing knowledge and resources across communities,
Okay.
learning from each other's experiences.
That interconnectedness is so inspiring. Like
Yeah.
that willingness to share and learn from each other.
Yeah.
It feels like such a powerful antidote to the isolation and individualism
Right.
that we see in modern society so often.
Right. Totally agree. Caring for country is all about recognizing our interconnectedness with each other and with the natural world. It's about understanding that our well-being is inseparable from the health of the land.
It's a really profound message, and one that feels more urgent than ever
Yeah,
in the face of climate change and all these other global challenges.
definitely.
Now, I know our listener might be wondering, okay, what can I do
Yeah,
to support this movement?
right,
How can I contribute to the success of caring for country, even if I'm not Indigenous or living in Australia?
right. Well, there's so many ways to get involved.
Okay.
Donating to Indigenous-led organizations is a great way to provide direct support.
Yeah.
Volunteering your time and skills is another valuable contribution. And perhaps most importantly, educating yourself about the issues
Right.
and raising awareness among your friends and family.
Those are all fantastic suggestions. We'll be sure to include links to some reputable organizations in the show notes,
Great.
so our listener can easily find ways to get involved.
Perfect. And I think it's also important to remember that caring for country is not just about Indigenous people.
Right.
It's a responsibility we all share. It's about recognizing that we're all connected to the land no matter where we live or what our background is.
It's about finding ways to, connect with nature,
Yeah.
respect the land, and give back to our communities. It's about understanding that our actions have consequences,
Right.
and that even small acts of care and stewardship can make a difference.
Exactly. It's about shifting our mindset from one of extraction and domination
Okay.
to one of reciprocity and respect.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that the earth is not just a resource to be exploited,
Right.
but a living being to be honored and cherished.
That's a beautiful message to end on. Thanks for joining us in this deep dive into the world of caring for country, listener.
My pleasure.
We hope you've been inspired to learn more about this vital movement
Yeah.
and the role it plays in shaping a better future for all. And thanks to you two for sharing your expertise with us today.
It's been a pleasure. Until next time.
Until next time.